I recently watched the movie Room. It's the story of some lady who had been kidnapped and kept as a slave, and then she gave birth to a child in this one little shed out in somebody's backyard. Horrible story. But it occurred to me that child who had been born into that room and had only seen the world through the skylight of this little, extremely confined place, he had an understanding of the world. But his entire world was Room. Was that little place and the weird non-real images on the television that they were allowed, and then the little glimpse of the sky. That was his understanding of the world. In reality, all of us live like that. It's just our room may be slightly bigger, or maybe the skylight with which we see the sky is slightly bigger. But to try and actually see the world in its totality, it's virtually impossible. Maybe we can see, a documentary program, or we can read a travel book, or we can look at a coffee table book, or we'll get on an airplane and go somewhere else, and you start to piece together some of the threads of the fabric that is our actual planet. But I've been lucky enough to take sort of the best of our transportation technology that we've ever invented, and to get on board a ship and go around the world in 92 minutes. And not just once, because that would just be a travel documentary. Most of everything would bounce off you because you can't absorb that much information so quickly. But to go around the world 100 times and then 1,000 times, and not just going around the world, but around the world 16 times a day where it turns underneath you. So every circumnavigation is like another voyage of discovery. And the angle between you and the sun and the world, because of your speed, is constantly changing. And the seasons are changing. I went from one side of the sun to the other, right across the solar system while I was on the space station, right around it. So you saw winter and summer swap ends on the world. And so each time around, you see the world slightly more for what it is, more clearly. And somewhere along the way, in one of those thousands of orbits, I think you start to see the world as what it actually is, which is room, but it's the whole thing. It's one place. This whole thing is just our collective shared room. And we almost all miss that because we're just only able to absorb the confines of the part of it that we're raised with. But I feel hugely privileged, without anybody telling me what to think, and without any filters in the way, to actually have seen the whole world over and over and over again until it seeped into me permanently. And it doesn't necessarily give me any outlandish insight or any outlandish imperative to change the world, but I think it does give me a perspective that I feel compelled to try and share, to try and let as many other people. I was there on behalf of a lot of people. It took a lot of lucre to build that rocket ship and accelerate my body to 8 kilometers a second and let me stay there. And so I feel a responsibility to do my best to let other people see what's beyond their room based on the things that I've seen. I think I've been hugely lucky, and I think we collectively are more liable to make good decisions for ourselves and for where we live, the more clearly we can see the whole thing as one place. I think what we're truly getting at is a collective understanding of where we are and what it means. And the where we are is the part that we can share the best. What it means is an individual choice. But the more people you meet, the more you understand what battles people are fighting, the more you see the commonality of the human experience itself, I think the more clearly you start to perhaps understand what could be called the overview effect. But then the real question, of course, is if you do feel that maybe something has enlightened you a little bit, or if you've had a thought that most people have not, do you just have a secret smile, or do you try and maybe share it with someone you love, or write it down, or take a picture, or with social media, say, hey, here's something really intriguing I thought about. Anybody else ever thought of it this way? I think shared understanding is what empowers us more than anything. There are a few different ways to experience some things. Some are just through your imagination. You can read a book about flying an airplane, and you sort of have some understanding of what it's like to fly an airplane. Or you can buy a ticket and get on British Airways and be sitting in seat 17F, so that you're by the window, and looking out the window of your airplane and seeing the world that way. And it's very different than what the book told you. But imagine if instead of being on the inside side of that window, you were on the outside of that window looking at the world. You're only 3 feet over, but it's an entirely different experience. You have the nature of the actual interface with the environment you're in. You feel the wind pressure in that case. You feel the cold of it. It's 50 below outside that little window, and you have no sense of that sitting inside. But plus, the yawning enormity of where you are is sort of lost on you when you're sitting there. But to be outside of that airplane, which with the wind rush, it would be pretty hard to do, a wing walker on an airliner, but you would really start to understand what's actually going on. Spacewalks like that. You can read about a spacewalk or watch a movie of a spacewalk and you sort of get a sense of it. And then when you're on board a spaceship and you're floating weightless by the window, especially we have one bulging window, the cupola, so you can almost freely look around. You get some sense of where you actually are. But the day that you, for real, are going to be on the other side of that window, that you're going to assume the danger of it. You're going to build this spacesuit around your body, and then go into a tiny bit of the ship and close a hatch behind you. You're going to become a torpedo, and then take all the air out of that little part you're in, and then open up the hatch, and now actually physically pull yourself on the outside of the ship. That's entirely different, even though it's only a few feet away. I spent my whole life visualizing it, dreaming about it, talking to guys who've done it, and then training in virtual reality, training underwater. But suddenly, the part of your body that's in the sun is plus 150 Celsius, and you feel the searing heat of that. And the part of you that's in the shade is minus 140 Celsius. And so when your legs touch the fabric of the inflated suit, it's like growing up on a farm with super cold metal on a stovepipe, and you don't want to let it touch your skin because it's so searingly cold. You feel the environment that you're in, and there's a complete silence to it. So the sound doesn't even conduct as well, so it's whisper quiet in there, and the world is silently, you can see the entire face of the whole planet right across a continent, and it's right there beside you, and it's silently turning, and the whole universe is right here, and you're in the middle holding on with one hand. It's extremely visceral and physical and personal and intimate to be in the world that way. And it's life or death. One little mistake, and you may cause irreparable damage to something that's almost beyond value, or kill yourself or kill the person that you're out there with. So the stakes are extremely high. It's an amazingly focused 8 hours of your life to be out on a spacewalk, and what I consider perhaps to be the most magnificent time that I've ever spent in all the various things I've done in my life. I was on my first spacewalk. I was out with a guy named Scott Perezinski, and I was working away, and suddenly my left eye just seared with pain and stopped working, like slammed itself shut. And you can't rub it on anything, you can't reach it because it's in a helmet. So I just kind of like, just tough it out. What am I going to do? I got something in my eye. I can't get it out of my eye. Your eye tears up so badly, try to fight whatever the contamination is. And the tears don't drain because there's no gravity. So you just have this bigger and bigger ball of contaminated whatever it was, until eventually the ball gets so big that it goes across the bridge of your nose and contaminates your other eye just from the surface tension of the tear flowing across. So I had to stop working. Could be a pretty terrifying moment if you weren't ready for it. But Scott and I had gone through all the various training, all of the visualization we could think of. And while he and I had been underwater in the pool, one of the many thousands of things we'd practice was, what if one of us gets incapacitated? What if you get the bends, or you have a heart attack, or your comm system quits, or you have a horrible cramp, or whatever, you punch a little hole in your suit. What if one of us gets incapacitated? How are we going to react? We practiced that. And our trainers would sometimes, they'd come on the private loop and say, okay, pretend you just passed out. So that the other person had to even go, hey, Chris, how you doing? Chris, can you hear me? And then having to follow all the reactions to make it as realistic as possible. So when I was actually blinded, it wasn't so bad. It's like I can still talk and hear, and Scott and I are discussing, and I'm still holding on. I just can't see. But we popped open the vent on the side of my helmet, and we let my oxygen squirt out into the universe, fed by the tank on my back, so that it would hopefully dilute and clear my eyes as quick as possible. You
prepare for failure. You make redundancies upon redundancies upon redundancies.
Sure.
You train yourself. That's really what an astronaut's about, right?
In my experience, things hardly ever go perfectly, even if you want them to. Stuff goes wrong. That's just life. Stuff goes wrong. You're trying to make it to a meeting and there's traffic, or you have a flat tire. The odds are pretty high that you're going to have a flat tire, or you're going to get stuck in traffic, or something. But reality is, how do you prepare for the things that are liable to go wrong? That's what life kind of is. When things happen, how ready were you to deal with them? Or did they just derail your plans and what you were hoping to do with your life? And it's not like you need to invest a huge amount of your life getting ready for that. One time you can say, at some point in my life, I'm going to have a flat tire with this car. Let's just take the next 5 minutes and go make sure I got everything I need. I don't want to have a flat tire, but I might someday. If I do, I got everything I need. I know how to do it. Fine. And then move on to the next thing. And I sort of treat everything in my life as that potential flat tire, and I try and use the time available beforehand to be ready for it. And to me then, I'm not driving through life going, man, I hope I don't have a flat tire because I have no idea what to do, which I think just gives you an ulcer. I would much rather go through life saying, if this problem pops up, I know what to do. And when I think of some other problem that might pop up, I'm going to spend the time I got to get ready for that. And I think you appreciate life more. You're not just driving through life all tensed up and nervous at the things that you don't know what to do. And you have sort of a calm and a confidence, so that then you notice the nuance of what's happening around you. I prefer life that way. But Walter Cronkite and the Capcom and Neil and Buzz and the voices and the clipped professional brevity of what they were saying, but also the import of what was happening, and listening to the fact that they were having buffer overloads and serious problems, and then Neil having to actually say, we can't land here, and taking control, and then taking it over and touching down on the moon with 16 seconds of fuel left. That affected billions of people. The entire world let out a breath at that moment. And then looking at what that meant to us, the things we can accomplish when we set our minds to it. Impossible things happen as a result of a huge amount of hard work. To realize that, it was like permission to me as a 9-year-old kid to watch that happen. To realize this wasn't fate, this wasn't inevitability, this was the personification of human ingenuity and drive and desire to explore and desire to understand, and then to cooperate and make something happen right at the edge of our capability. And impossible things happen. It inspired me to try and change who I was going to be in life. It sort of gave me permission to say, that's what I want to do. Impossible stuff happens. Look what those guys just did. That's what I'm going to try and turn myself into.